I had barely set down my last moving box when the cavalry arrived. The soft hum of electric golf carts broke the lakeside tranquility, rolling up my gravel driveway in perfect formation. At their helm was a woman who carried herself like royalty inspecting a peasant's hut. She wore a crisp, pastel blazer, pearl earrings, and a name tag that gleamed under the noon sun: Marcia Whitmore, HOA president. Trailing behind her was a small entourage of clipboard-clutching board members, their expressions a mixture of forced smiles and thinly veiled suspicion. Their eyes scanned my newly purchased property, my lakeside cabin, the surrounding dock, and the pristine stretch of water that wrapped around it all, as if appraising contraband. Marcia's heels crunched against the gravel as she approached, her smile as practiced as a politician's handshake. "Welcome to Clearwater Shores," she said, her voice coated with saccharine sweetness that couldn't quite hide the steel beneath. "Thanks," I replied, brushing dust off my hands. "Didn't expect such a grand welcome." "Oh, we always make a point to greet new homeowners, especially when they've purchased such significant property." Her gaze drifted towards the lake, lingering on the dock jutting from my backyard. "You see, the lake is the heart of our community. Our members have used those docks for years, for fishing, kayaking, family gatherings. It's a tradition, really." I knew where this was going. "That's nice," I said flatly. "But the lakefront and every dock on it came with my deed. It's private property." Marcia's smile didn't waver, but a flicker of annoyance passed through her eyes. "That's precisely what we're here to discuss. You see, while the paperwork may say one thing, community expectations say another. It would be in everyone's best interest if you signed these easement agreements." She produced a thick binder as if unveiling a peace treaty. I didn't take it. I'm not in the business of giving away property I just paid for. The air around us shifted, the cordial facade beginning to crack. Behind Marcia, her board members exchanged glances. The tallest of them, a man with a sunburnt neck and aviator sunglasses, muttered something about difficult newcomers. Marcia's lips pressed into a thin line. "I understand you're new here, so let me be clear. Clearwater Shores has thrived for decades on cooperation. We can't have one homeowner disrupting that balance. The lake is a shared resource." "Not legally," I said, my tone sharpening. "I have the surveys, the water rights, and the deed to prove it. Your HOA has no claim here." Her eyes narrowed. "You'll find the HOA has ways of persuading residents to see reason." There it was. The threat, wrapped in civility, but unmistakable. I had seen this playbook before. Bureaucrats who confused tradition with entitlement, who believed long-standing habits trumped property law. What Marcia didn't realize was that I wasn't some clueless city slicker. I'd spent 15 years as a property rights attorney. This was a fight I knew how to win. "I'll tell you what, Marcia," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice just enough for only her to hear. "You stay on your side of the property line, and I'll stay on mine. Seems fair, doesn't it?" Her smile returned, but now it was brittle, like porcelain on the verge of shattering. "We'll see how long you feel that way." With a curt nod, she turned on her heel. The HOA committee followed, their golf carts retreating down the driveway like a defeated patrol, though something in their posture told me this was only the first skirmish. As the last cart disappeared behind the tree line, I stood alone, the breeze off the lake cooler now, sharper. My sanctuary had become a battleground before I'd even had the chance to unpack. But one thing was crystal clear. The HOA had fired the first shot, and I had no intention of backing down. Marcia Whitmore didn't waste time. By the following morning, a neatly folded letter sat on my porch, encased in a plastic sleeve as if it were a formal declaration of war. The header read, "Notice of violation, Clearwater Shores HOA." Violation? I hadn't even been there 48 hours. The accusations were laughable. My mailbox was allegedly 3 inches too tall. The gravel driveway lacked HOA-approved edging. Even the shade of my cabin shutters was non-compliant with community aesthetic standards. Standards I knew that didn't legally apply to me because I wasn't part of their HOA. But this wasn't about mailboxes or paint colors. This was about control. I crumpled the letter, tossing it into the recycling bin, but I knew better than to think the matter was closed. By week's end, the real siege began. It started with the dock inspections. Every morning, HOA board members appeared near my property line, armed with clipboards and fluorescent safety vests, pretending to assess the structural integrity of docks they had no business touching. They didn't set foot on my land. Not yet, but they hovered just close enough to make their presence felt. Then came the lawn committee. A group of retirees with yardsticks and digital cameras strolled past my front lawn daily, muttering about weeds encroaching onto community sightlines. Their commentary was thinly veiled provocation. They weren't interested in landscaping. They were testing boundaries, mine. But the fishing derby was their boldest move. That Saturday, a parade of trucks, SUVs, and minivans descended upon my private lakefront as if it were a public park. Without so much as a courtesy call, the HOA hosted their annual fishing tournament, setting up tents, coolers, and even a rented sound system. I watched from my porch as strangers set up folding chairs on my dock, casting lines into my lake like it was theirs by birthright. Children sprinted across my property, their parents offering a perfunctory wave as if their trespassing was a quaint neighborly tradition. I marched down to the water's edge, locking eyes with Marcia, who stood beneath a banner that read Clearwater Shores Community Derby, 21st Annual. Her smile was triumphant. "You're welcome to join us," she called, voice dripping with mock hospitality. "It's a community event, after all." "I believe you're trespassing," I said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. Marcia's smile didn't budge. This lake has always been part of Clearwater Shore's tradition. A single deed won't erase decades of shared use. I stepped closer. "Tradition doesn't override property law, Marcia. I suggest you pack up before I involve a sheriff." Her eyes glinted with challenge. "We'll see who the sheriff sides with." It was a bluff. A dangerous one. But she was betting that peer pressure and her illusion of authority would corner me into submission. What she didn't know was that my patience had a short fuse, and she had just lit the match. That evening, I drafted a cease and desist letter. A formal notice, laced with legal citations that left no room for misinterpretation. Trespassing on private property. Unauthorized use of docks. Harassment through frivolous citations. Every move they had made, I documented. But I wasn't naive. Paperwork alone wouldn't stop them. This was a power play, a battle not just of laws, but of will. I fortified my defenses. Security cameras went up, high-definition, motion-activated, every inch of my dock and property now under constant watch. Warning signs were posted, clear and undeniable. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Yet, as I bolted the final sign into the post near the dock, I knew Marcia wouldn't back down. Not yet. Her type didn't fold after a single letter or a posted sign. She thrived on dominance, and conceding meant unraveling her image of control. But I had shifted the battlefield. The next move would be hers. And I was ready. Marcia struck first. But now it was my turn. The morning after the fishing derby fiasco, I arrived at the county clerk's office with a stack of documents under my arm, deed records, water rights certificates, and property surveys stamped and sealed. Within an hour, I had filed an official cease and desist order against the Clearwater Shores HOA. But I wasn't just playing defense anymore. Marcia had declared a war of attrition, constant pressure, hoping I'd tire and fold. What she hadn't accounted for was that I had more endurance than her entire HOA committee combined. The very next day, I delivered certified copies of the cease and desist to Marcia's front door. Not her mailbox. Her front door. I wanted her to feel it. By noon, the HOA's legal advisor, some pompous fellow named Rick Donovan, sent me an email laced with half-hearted legal jargon, claiming implied community easement rights and historical access precedents. I could almost hear his condescension through the screen. I sent him a single-line response. "I hope you enjoy reading the Supreme Court cases that dismantle your argument, Rick." Attachments enclose. The attachments were 60 pages of legal precedents. Bulletproof. But the HOA wasn't done. 2 days later, a group of inspectors arrived under the guise of a routine safety evaluation. They approached my dock with measuring tapes and clipboards, but this time, they were met with a surprise. Deputy Morales from the county sheriff's office, standing tall with a folded copy of the cease and desist in hand. "Gentlemen," Morales said, his voice calm but firm, "unless you're here on official county business, you're trespassing. This is private property." He pointed at the nearest camera. "And we have it all on record." The inspectors scattered like cockroaches. Word spread quickly.
But Marcia?
She wasn't so easily rattled. She doubled down, rallying her loyalists to flood the HOA's community page with posts painting me as a hostile newcomer, intent on isolating the community from its cherished lake. The smear campaign was relentless. Photos of my non-compliant mailbox circulated like tabloid scandals. But every comment, every accusation, was more desperate than the last. It was time for a decisive strike. I requested a slot on the agenda for the upcoming Clearwater Shores Town Hall meeting. They had no legal grounds to refuse. When the evening arrived, I didn't show up alone. I walked into that room with a presentation folder, a laser pointer, and an undeniable weapon: the truth. As residents filled the hall, I calmly laid out the facts. The original land plats showed the lake, docks, and even the access road were part of my private property, never once transferred to HOA control. Decades of traditional use did not equate to legal ownership. Then I revealed the footage, videos of HOA members trespassing, tampering with my dock, and issuing fabricated violations. The room, once buzzing with murmurs, fell into a suffocating silence. But the final blow was yet to come. I flipped to the last slide, showing an aerial map. "This stretch of road here," I pointed, letting the pause linger, "is also on my deed, which means, technically, your community docks. You can't legally access them without crossing my land." A ripple of gasps filled the hall. Marcia's face flushed a shade of crimson that no HOA regulation could approve. She stood, her voice sharp. "This is absurd. You're trying to hold the entire community hostage over a technicality." "No, Marcia," I said calmly. "I'm reminding you, and everyone here, that respect for property lines goes both ways. I didn't buy this place to lock people out, but I also didn't buy it to be bullied." There it was. The shift. Neighbors who had once parroted Marcia's rhetoric now exchanged glances, reconsidering the battle she'd dragged them into. The weight of legal reality was sinking in. Marcia tried to pivot, attempted to rally one last time, but her voice lacked its earlier edge. She had overplayed her hand, and now her supporters were slipping away like sand through fingers. As the meeting adjourned, several residents approached me, not with accusations, but with handshakes. "Didn't realize she was pushing this hard," one man admitted. "I just thought it was how things were done," another added. Marcia, on the other hand, slipped out the side door, her entourage noticeably thinner. The HOA's illusion of power had cracked. But I knew Marcia well enough now. She wouldn't concede defeat with dignity. There would be one last gasp, one desperate attempt to claw back control. And I was ready for it. Marcia Whitmore wasn't finished. Even after the town hall humiliation, after her fabricated claims had been dismantled piece by piece, she wasn't ready to surrender. She was a woman who had ruled Clearwater Shores with an iron clipboard for over a decade, and letting go of that power wasn't in her nature.
So, she escalated.
2 days after the meeting, I woke up to find a large notice of pending HOA lien duct taped to my front door. Bold, red letters threaten legal action over unpaid community dues and noncompliance penalties. It was pure bluff. She had no legal standing to place a lien on my property. But Marcia wasn't aiming for legality. She was aiming for fear. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't the target audience. I made a single call to my attorney, who, after a brief chuckle, drafted a formal defamation and harassment lawsuit against Marcia personally. Not the HOA. Her. I ensured copies were delivered to her residence and the HOA office, just as publicly as she had taped her baseless threats to my door. By week's end, Marcia found herself not only facing a personal lawsuit but also under investigation by the county for abuse of authority and falsifying legal notices. The fallout was swift. HOA board members who had once flanked her like a royal court began distancing themselves, some even resigning publicly. Residents who had been indifferent or intimidated were now openly critical, questioning the very necessity of an HOA if it could be weaponized so recklessly. The HOA scheduled an emergency leadership vote. It wasn't even close. Marcia was ousted in a landslide, her position handed over to a level-headed neighbor named Doug, who wasted no time announcing reforms that limited the HOA's jurisdiction to actual members' properties. Mine was off-limits. But I wasn't out for revenge. I wanted resolution. With Marcia removed, I extended an olive branch. I drafted limited-use access agreements for the lake. Anyone who wanted to fish, kayak, or enjoy the docks could do so, with written permission that clearly outlined boundaries and responsibilities. No more entitlement. No more HOA overreach. Just mutual respect. The community responded better than I expected. Families who had once eyed me with suspicion now thanked me for protecting a space they loved. They understood now it was never about shutting them out. It was about drawing a line against those who abused power. Marcia, however, faded into the background. Her lawsuit settled quietly. She issued a formal apology, though thinly veiled in legal language. Still, it was on record, a written acknowledgement that her actions had been out of line, malicious even. The woman who had once strutted down the docks as their self-proclaimed queen was now reduced to occasional, awkward appearances at community events. Her influence evaporated. But life around Clearwater Shores? It flourished. Without the constant overreach, neighbors began organizing their own gatherings, simple, informal, cooperative. The atmosphere shifted from one of enforced order to genuine community spirit. One evening, as the sun bled into the lake, I hosted a small get-together on my dock. No HOA banners, no clipboard patrols, just neighbors sharing drinks, stories, and laughter. It was the kind of scene Marcia had always claimed to represent but never truly fostered. As the sky darkened, I caught sight of her. Marcia stood across the road, alone, watching. There was no entourage, no binder in hand. Just a silent observer to a community that had moved on without her. She turned and left without a word. In the end, Marcia had ambushed me with arrogance, tried to strong-arm me into submission. But all she'd succeeded in doing was exposing the fragility of power when it's built on entitlement. I hadn't just defended my rights. I had reclaimed a community,